Hey y'all, Pastor Chris here. I've been getting a lot of comments from folks asking me what I think about Donald Trump being the Antichrist, so I thought I'd answer that today. So, certainly, a lot of people do think that he is the Antichrist, and one of those people happens to be my mother. She actually wrote a book. It's called The Antichrist Contender. You can see it there. You can get this on Amazon. And the thing is that yeah, he ticks a lot of the boxes, and this book I will say is very well researched. She did a really great job of breaking it down point by point, all of the biblical connections and otherwise of between Donald Trump and the Antichrist character from the Bible. But here's the thing about the Antichrist character, and I will say that I love my mother and I support her. We are not the same person, and so I don't share all of her views. There's some theology in here I don't necessarily subscribe to, but I do support her. And so what I will say is that the Antichrist is a character, a figure that we primarily find in the latter parts of the book of Daniel, and then in, of course, the book of Revelation. And these two works in the Bible are a specific genre of literature that we call apocalyptic literature. And the thing about apocalyptic literature is that it is heavily symbolic. Okay. And so you can read just about anything into it. It's highly open to interpretation. That's why people have been predicting the end times based on Revelation for a couple thousand years, pretty much since the church, since the book of Revelation was written and the church was first formed. There have been end times predictions every couple of years, and they've really ramped up recently, but none of them have come true because you can make so many things fit into that symbolism. But the book of Revelation specifically was written during the reign of the Emperor Domitian, who was a very staunch advocate for the old Roman gods. He was a micromanager. He ruled with an iron fist. And so you could argue that the Antichrist character in Revelation also fits the Emperor Domitian. You could also argue that that character fits pretty much any narcissistic, despotic ruler that you could name throughout history. A lot of people thought that Hitler was the Antichrist. And my point is that anybody who checks off these boxes, who is explicitly anti-Christian, and checks off these symbolic boxes in the books of Daniel and Revelation, you could theoretically say that they are the Antichrist. But why do we need to specifically identify the capital A Antichrist? If somebody is checking off these boxes, if somebody is conducting themselves in such a way that they are completely opposed to everything that Christ stands for, we should be following them anyway. We shouldn't be supporting them in any way. I don't really see the point in specifically identifying the Antichrist. I think that a lot of people think that if it was somehow proven that Donald Trump is the Antichrist, then his followers would wake up and they would have the scales fall from their eyes and they wouldn't follow him anymore. But maybe I'm just being cynical here. I just don't think that's true. We already know he is explicitly anti-Jesus. He goes against everything that Jesus taught, everything that Jesus stands for, and people are still following him. I don't think that labeling him the Antichrist would change that, sadly. I think that people are more in love with power and control than they are with Jesus, and that's why people are following him. I don't think it would make a difference. Now, I won't say that's all of his followers. I think a lot of folks have been gaslit, brainwashed, lied to, misinformed. They've been watching a lot of propaganda and they've bought into it. And so I won't say that their primary motivation is power and control, but I do think that part of the motivation is on a systemic level, people feeling like they lost their social power and they want it back. I'm talking primarily about straight white men, white people in general, but people who were not previously marginalized. They no longer have their privilege, or they no longer have as much of it, and they're feeling that, and so they're feeling disenfranchised, even if maybe everything is just being more equitably distributed. And so that is why they are supporting him. So in a way, it is still kind of about power, but I think that a lot of people have just had the wool pulled over their eyes. But here's the thing. We don't need to prove that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. What we need is for these folks to wake up to the fact that he goes against everything Jesus stands for. And the sad reality is that I do think a lot of people just won't care. Because I think that a lot of people, if they really knew what Jesus stood for, if they really followed Christ's teachings, or knew that they were supposed to follow Christ's teachings, they just wouldn't. They're a part of the church because it's the popular thing to do and because it gives them power, and it's not because they want to be self-giving and self-sacrificing, and to make themselves less than so that others can get a leg up. And that's very sad to me, but it is, unfortunately, I think, that just the world that we live in. St. Augustine once said that there's a visible church and there's an invisible church. The visible church is all the people you see on Sunday going to church. All right, it's everybody who, raised their hand and says, I'm a Christian. It's everybody who's going and being a part of the church. The invisible church, Augustine said, is all those people who are actually following Jesus. Quick plug for my podcast, Actually Following Jesus. New episode drops Monday. Check it out if you haven't already. The invisible church is all of those people who are actually following Jesus. From my perspective, the invisible church can include people who are not a part of the visible church. That is, that there are people out there who would not claim the label Christian, who are nonetheless still following what Jesus taught, whether they're doing that intentionally or they're doing that because that's how they want to live. And so I think that a lot of Christians these days that claim that label are not actually following Jesus, are not a part of the invisible church, as Augustine said, even if they may be part of the visible church. And pointing out to them that Donald Trump is not a Christ follower, has nothing to do with Jesus, and actually everything that he stands for is diametrically opposed to Jesus, is simply not going to change their minds, unfortunately. I don't know what that means for us. I don't know where we go with that, but I just wanted to address that question of whether or not he is the Antichrist. For those of us that see that connection, I think whether he is or not, the reaction should be the same, which is to not support him, not follow him, and instead turn toward Jesus and do what Jesus wants us to do. I know this has been long, but that's going to be all from me. I will see you all in the next video, Lord willing, on TikTok on Monday. If not, please go and follow my Instagram. It's Pastor Chris R. Or you can find me on YouTube at pastorchris.r. And again, you can find my podcast, Actually Following Jesus. But hopefully I will see you again on TikTok on Monday. Until next time, bye for now.